Do you want to go on an adventure? Battle your way through a dungeon filled with monsters, minions, and slimes, find treasure, avoid traps, and defeat huge bosses to earn the most glory! And it's time for Mini Meeple Melee Adventures Expansion. Hello and welcome to Aaron's Game Room. I'm Aaron as always, and today we are going over the Mini Meeple Melee Adventures Expansion. This is not a standalone one, unlike the Fire and Ice one. This is a full-blown expansion. You must have either the standard Mini Meeple Melee game, or you could also have the Fire and Ice standalone expansion. Either one, you must have one of these to be able to play this one as well. The Adventures Expansion is a semi-cooperative experience for 1 to 4 players. In this video, we're going to start by going over the standard adventure format of the game. We'll be going over the survival game mode later. In all the examples you will see today, we are playing under the pretense that no player will be controlling the dungeon master of sorts, controlling the bad guys on any level. It will all be automated rules. This is no longer a game where you're fighting against each other. This has now become a game where you are working together somewhat to fight against monsters and defeat their big boss at the end of the game. But whereas you are working together, we all know at the end of the day when you're sitting around a tavern, enjoying a nice cold one, talking to all your friends about the adventures you've gone on today, what really matters is who did the most, who collected the most glory and brought back the most treasures from this adventure. Yes, we were all there, but I was the one who took down 2 of those orcs while you were just killing that slime over there. Oh, but hold on. Let's not forget that I was also the one that dealt the final blow to the boss. Exactly. Anyways, enough talking about it. Let's go down to the table and show you guys how this is all played. Now again, this is an expansion, so you will need at least one of these to be able to use this. This all does incorporate together. You can use it all as one big thing, but for this video, we're only going to be using content from the base game. Let's get on with it. So the first part of setup, you're going to take all the terrain cards. You can take the ones in your base games, as well as there are 2 that come in the Adventure Center itself, and shuffle it up and place this off to the side somewhere. You will need to take one of the tins as your starting space, and take the top card of the terrain deck you just made and place it in the tin. Just like in the main game, each player should roll to see who goes first, and each player should obviously, after determining player order, select which character they want to be. We're not going to go over all this too much. You'll need to watch the main video for a lot of the basics of this. Most of the stuff we're talking about is what's different and special to this version of the game. Be sure to give whichever player is going first the first player marker. It's one of the teleportation circles you use in the standard game. You don't need it in this version, so go ahead and just give them that as the first player marker. If you happen to have the Treasures expansion, you could use this nifty little coin we give you. But if not, go ahead and use this. Drop-in works the same as the normal game. Just drop them in. Any space they're touching, you can start them off on. Nothing different here. Next, you'll need to decide which of the 3 boss monsters you'd wish to fight for this game. Once you've decided which boss you're going to fight, be sure to take all the matching minion cubes of the same color. You can also see which minions match the boss because they're on the back of the card. And take all these slime cubes as well. Just place all this off to the side near the board. All the other cubes can go back in the bag, but keep them nearby as you might need them for point and scoring purposes later in the game. After all the players have dropped in and you've selected your monsters, it's time to spawn your monsters into the board. You'll need to roll the die, and whichever number you roll will determine which monster you drop into the board. You will need to summon 1 monster per player for the easiest difficulty level. If you want a harder game, simply summon some extra monsters in. So for example, I rolled a 5, so I would summon a level 2 minion. Since I'm fighting the dragon, that means a level 2 minion is a dark wizard. I would simply do like normal drop-in. I would aim, let go, and there's its starting space right there. Then have whichever player is going last in the current turn order place a crate on any free space in the tin. And lastly, you'll need to determine which of the 2 small ends of the tin will be the exit for this first tin. So just sort of say even odds, or again, if you got a treasure expansion, you can give this a flip. But let's say even odds here, and alright. It looks like this will be our exit for the first tin. Meaning players, when they move over this, they will enter a new area, and will spawn in a new tin with new monsters and things for them to go through. We'll go over that here in a bit. On a player's turn, they will take 2 actions just like the standard game. And all standard actions from the standard game are also used in this game mode as well, except for the teleport action because you don't use teleportation circles in this. You're just moving forward. There's really nowhere to teleport. However, there is one new action you can take on your turn, which is the Search for Treasure action. Yes, that is right, if you meet the proper conditions. Rule 1, there must be fewer monsters in the tin than there are players in the tin you are attempting to search. So, if there are 3 players standing in the tin you want to search and only 2 monsters, then yes, you are allowed to take the Search for Treasure action. Secondly, you cannot have any monsters directly adjacent to you at all. If any monsters are directly adjacent to you, then they're not going to let you start looking around the battlefield for potions. As long as both of those requirements are met, you are allowed to search for treasure. When a player chooses to search for treasure, they will need 2 dice. Give them both a roll, then use those numbers and compare them to the list we have given you here, reference card. If you roll a 1 at all, then unfortunately, you find nothing. If one of your dice is a 2, then you have found a trap. Sorry, basically the way to read this is to always look at smaller number than higher number. So, like, rolling a 2-2 would mean you found a pit trap. That means you need to then roll a dice, and if you roll a 2 or higher, then you successfully avoided the trap. I did. But unfortunately, if you end up rolling lower than whatever number it says here, then you did not avoid the trap and you receive 1 damage. Some of the possibilities, including 3-3 up to 4-6, can all be potions. If you have found a potion, simply find the potion with the matching icon and take that and keep it in front of you. This is yours to keep until you use it, although keep in mind these are a one-time use item. And if you choose to use it, it'll have an immediate effect from now until the end of your next turn. So, for example, if I were to use my Potion of Strength, it will give me a +1 to all my attacks. If I use this at the beginning of my turn, that means all my attacks this turn and all my attacks next turn would get the +1 modifier from this potion. Because again, it's from use until the end of your next turn. However, if you choose not to use a potion and keep it with you the entire game, at the end of the game, potions are worth points, just like the collected monsters. 1 point for each unused potion. Remember that using a potion is a free action and does not take up one of the 2 actions you get on a turn. So if you choose to use a potion, that is a free extra thing. Lucky you. But also don't forget, they are one-time use. After it's used, you gotta discard it. And lastly, be careful because some of the highest rolls can find you wandering monsters. You'll see level 1 wandering slime, level 1 wandering minion, and level 2 wandering minion. If you roll this, then you simply drop in the summoned monster just as though it were spawned at the start of a new tin. Then, after each player has taken their 2 actions, any remaining monsters and minions still on the field will now get to take 2 actions as well. Each monster still remaining will get to take 2 actions. Again, we are using automated rules for this how to play video, so we will now explain what we call the rules of engagement, which are a few rules that the monsters must follow to decide how they will take their actions and what actions they will take. When it's time for the monsters to attack, players will decide in which order they will act. If there's any kind of disagreement, then whichever player is currently holding the first player marker settles that dispute. Once you have selected which monster will act, follow these rules. Rule 1. If a hero is within the monster's attack range, it will immediately attack. If there are multiple heroes within the attack range of the monster, then it will attack whichever hero most recently attacked this monster. And if there's still a tie between which hero it will attack, then it will attack whichever hero comes earlier in the current turn order. Rule number 2. If there are no heroes within the attack range of the current monster, then it will move towards the closest hero, following the same rules as combat. It will go towards the closest one. If there are multiple that are closest, then it'll move towards whichever one attacked it most recently. And if there's still a tie, then it'll go after whichever one is earlier in the turn order. If, after moving, the monster still isn't within range of any heroes, then its second action will also be a move action. Likewise, if after the monster attacks, it still has another action to spend, and there are still living heroes within its range, it will immediately make second attack action. Monsters that have range attacks do have some extra little rules on top of that as well. Anytime a monster with range must move, they will only move just close enough to put their target within range of their attack. For example, this level 2 slime has a range of 4. Currently, the red player is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces away. So, whereas a move action is normally 2 spaces, the slime will only move 1 space, as that's all it needs to do to get the hero within range of its attack. Secondly, if a monster with a ranged attack is adjacent to a player, a hero, then they will take a move action to get away from the hero. After each player has taken their actions and all the remaining monsters and minions on the field have taken their actions, then whoever has the first player marker will pass it to the player to their left, and they will begin the new round. When a player defeats a monster, remove that cube from the board, and we don't recommend keeping these ones. You can, but you might end up running out of cubes if you do. This is a good time to use those other cubes that you left off to the side. The player should keep the same size one. So if you defeat a level 1 monster, then keep a level 1 monster cube. Don't accidentally grab one of the larger level 2 monster cubes. Again, the sizes are different, plus again, you can tell by the backs of the cards. The top is always the level 1 and the bottom is always the level 2. So when you defeat a monster, be sure to grab an appropriate size cube to keep track of for points as the game goes on. When a player attempts to move out of the current tin into a new tin, you will need to spawn your next area. First, you will need to roll to determine whether the tin is attached like this or like this. Again, this is simply an even-odd situation. State which one's which, and then attach it properly. Again, just like at the start of the game, take the top card of the terrain deck and place it into the tin, and then follow the monster spawning rules you used at the beginning of the game, and have whichever player is currently last in the current turn order place a crate into this tin. Now, keep in mind, for the first tin, you had to roll to decide which end was the exit. After the first tin, for all future tins, the exit is always just the farthest side of where you entered. So if you're entering down towards this end, be it like this or this, either way, you're clearly down towards this end of the tin, so the exit is over here. Now, on the 4th tin, you will not summon monsters as usual. The 4th tin will always summon the boss monster. You will place him at the far end of whichever tin you are entering, farthest away from the entrance, and as you might be able to see, the boss is very large. He does not take up 1 space like all the others. He covers a full 4 spaces. All boss monsters do. Also, when you spawn the boss in, you'll need to take the card and a slider to keep track of their life. The boss will have 1, then plus 1 life for each player in the game. So in a 4-player game like so, the boss will have 5 health. Once all 5 health is gone, the boss is defeated and the game is over. Also be sure to not place a crate anywhere in the boss tin. When moving the boss, you'll essentially move 1 pair of spaces in the direction you're going. So I might move 1 right there, and then I might move 2 right there. Does that make sense, hopefully? It is also important to note that bosses are unaffected by terrain effects. When a player successfully deals damage to the boss, track it on the card, and make sure that player takes a level 1 monster cube so they can show the point they received for damaging the boss. And a last bit of extra combat rules. The bosses, since they take up 4 spaces like we've established, if they use a melee attack, then they will attack both orthogonally adjacent spaces in the direction of their attack. So, for example, the yellow player is technically the ogre's target, but because of where the red player is standing, both of them are going to be attacked by the ogre. When the boss is defeated, whichever player defeated the boss will take the boss cube. This is going to be worth 3 points in the final scoring. Before we get to adding up our scores for the end of the game, let's go over what happens if throughout the dungeon, your character's life total ends up hitting 0 and they are defeated. So, when a player's life total hits 0, they will immediately remove their character from the table, and they will lose half of any of their collected GP, glory points for monsters killed, and potions they've collected, separately, rounded down. So right now, I have 5 points in monsters, meaning I would lose 2 points for there, and I only have 1 potion, so I would keep it. At the start of their next turn, they would simply put their life back up to full, and drop back in their character as though it were the start of the game, and go on from there. At the end of the game, each player will add up all of their glory points for each of their collected monster cubes and remaining potions. That is 1 point for any level 1 monster, 2 points for any level 2, and 3 points for the boss cube, and 1 point for any remaining potions. And that should be pretty much everything you need to know on how to play the adventure mode of the Adventures expansion. Again, this was all assuming that no player was controlling the monsters at all. There are options for you to have one player control the boss monster. In those situations, you won't have to do all the rolling to decide which is exits or how stuff attaches or which monsters drop in. That can all be controlled by whichever player is controlling the monsters. How much control you give them can be up to you. You can give them full control where they can decide exactly which monsters you're fighting each turn, or they could get some control where you still roll to decide what monsters they're falling in. They just get to decide where they go and who they attack and stuff on their turn. All an option if one player wants to control the bad guy. You could also try, if you wanted, a full cooperative experience where instead of collecting points, instead what you do is you give your crew 3 lives, or a set number of lives of your choice, and basically you are trying to complete the entire dungeon without losing all of your lives. If you can successfully do that, hey, you guys have won. If not, sorry, try again. Now, on to survival mode. Survival mode is a mode for 1 or more players where you will simply be trying to survive as many waves of monsters as you can. Now, you can do a endless mode where you are just taking on as many waves as possible, or you could instead try to do a set number of waves mode where you give yourself, let's say, 10 rounds or waves of monsters to survive, and if you survive it, great. You could also do a bit of a competitive version where you're trying to just be the player that lasts the longest. So, all options in this fairly versatile but simple game mode. Now, just like in the adventure mode, you can have a player act as the dungeon master of sorts and controlling the bad ways if you would like. That's totally viable as well. You can also adjust the difficulty throughout the whole game by just increasing the number of monsters spawn. You could, if you want, spawn in a boss monster every certain number of waves, or if you're doing a set number of waves, have the final round be a big boss monster to fight. And just like in the Adventures mode, you can also have a set number of lives situation, where you've given yourselves, say, 3 lives, and anytime a player dies, remove one of those lives away, and you could have, once all 3 are out, then the whole team loses. Game over. Setup is identical to standard setup in the base game. If you want to use 10 from the original set and the expansion together to make a larger field, that is allowed. Simply find some new numbers for randomizing where you drop in at, such as maybe doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if you were doing just 3, or for all 4, maybe doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and if you roll a 5 or a 6, roll again. Or maybe you can decide between doing small or big, so evens, odds, and then once you've done that, roll again to see which of the 2 you fall into. Any sort of random factor to decide where your characters drop in, just like the standard game, is fine. In survival mode, you can choose to use the teleportation circles if you'd like. If you do choose to use these, simply place them in 2 different tins, and if you use them, you'll need to choose something else to use in place of the first player marker. We recommend using the treasure list reference card as a new first player marker. Once all the players have spawned in, you will then spawn in monsters. Spawning works just like in the standard adventure mode. Roll a die and summon the proper monster. However, in survival mode, you will summon 1 monster per player plus 2 for the starting wave. You can choose to use a certain set of minions, just like in the main game, or you could use a mix of all of them. If you're using all of them, whenever you summon a minion, just be sure to do a second die roll to decide which of the minions from the 3 teams you're summoning. For example, let's say you rolled to summon a level 1 minion. You would then roll a second time to determine which of the minions you'd be summoning in. A red, a green, or a white. So you might roll a second time and say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6. After you've summoned all your monsters, begin with whoever's holding the first player marker and take turns just as though you're using the adventure mode. Each player takes 2 actions, and after each player has taken their 2 actions, all remaining monsters will then take 2 actions as well, using the rules of engagement. After all remaining monsters have taken their actions, you will spawn in 1 new monster to the field. However, if only 1 monster or 0 monsters remain on the field at all, then you will spawn a full new wave just as you did at the start of the game. After you're done spawning in new monsters, make sure to pass the first player marker and continue playing. When a player is defeated, you simply remove them from the board and they are out of the game. When playing endless mode, the game ends when the last player is removed from the board. When playing a set number of waves, the game ends when the last monster is removed from the board or the last player is removed, whichever comes first. And that really should be everything you need to know about playing Survival and Adventures expansion as a whole. As always, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us by commenting down below, or you can email us over at baronsgames@yahoo.com. You can always contact us through our website, baronsgames.com, where, as always, we have our shop access. You can go to our shop and buy any of our games that we have available over on our store. We've also got merch there as well, shirts, pins, and keychains. And, of course, you can always follow us on all of our social media websites, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Subscribe. You'll always know when we have new games coming out, because we'll always be doing how-to-play videos just like this one. Anyway, guys, thank you all for watching. I've been Aaron. This is Baron's Game Room. See you next time.